The animal farm has become more relevant than ever, so let's just talk about it. Let's start with George Orwell, the mind behind this iconic book. Born on January 25th, 1903 in Bengal, British India, Orwell's real name was Eric Arthur Blair. He chose the pen name George Orwell and is now not only remembered for his author career, but also for his staunch opposition to totalitarianism in both spectrums, that being the left wing and right wing, while supporting democratic socialism. Orwell's most famous works, 1984 and Animal Farm, are timeless critiques of oppressive systems. And today we'll be focusing on Animal Farm. This book draws directly from the events of the Russian Revolution and the early Soviet Union. For those familiar with history, the parallels between Orwell's story and the revolution are pretty evident. And as someone like me who enjoys history a lot, I like that. If you're interested in Orwell's life and ideas, I'd encourage you to read more about him. Later in this video I will discuss two special prefaces included in the ViaLeitura edition of the book, which is the one I primarily read and used to make this video. One of these prefaces was written in 1945 but remained undiscovered until 1972, while the other was written for the 1947 Ukrainian edition of Animal Farm. We'll talk about those and some more about George himself when we reach that chapter of the video, but for now, let's jump into the story of Animal Farm. The story begins with Mr. Jones, the owner of the manor farm, drunk and passed out. Taking advantage of his absence, the animals gather in the main barn to listen to Old Major, an elderly pig with a powerful vision to share. Old Major had a dream of a world the animals lived free. He expresses his frustration with their miserable lives under human rule, where everything they produce is taken from them while they toil like slaves. He argues passionately that the animals must overthrow human tyranny once and for all. Humans, he says, take everything the animals produce while contributing nothing themselves. This will be a revolution against humankind and will bring peace and prosperity for all animals. Old Major then begins singing a forgotten song from long ago. The animals join in his singing and together they adopt the song as their anthem. Their voices swell in unison, but the singing soon wakes up Mr. Jones, who, assuming there's a fox in the barn, fires a shot in their general direction. Scared by the shot, the animals fall silent and retreat to their resting places, with Old Major's vision echoing in their minds. Only 3 nights later, Old Major dies of old age. But his dream lives on, and with the pigs being the smartest among the animals of the farm, they step up to lead the planning for the rebellion. 2 pigs, Snowball and Napoleon, quickly rise as the movement's most influential leaders, organizing secret meetings to spread the ideology of animalism, a system of principles the animals are encouraged to follow and abide by. Meanwhile, a raven named Moses preaches to the animals about a paradise called Sugar Candy Mountain, where good animals supposedly go after they die. The pigs, however, dismiss him as a spy for Mr. Jones, resenting both his message and his allegiance. By now, Mr. Jones had grown old, weak and neglectful. One weekend, he and his men failed to feed the animals and left them starving, pushing them to a breaking point. Enraged by this neglect, the animals united and launched the revolution, driving out Jones, his 4 farmhands, his wife, and even Moses the raven. At last, the manor farm belonged to them. Under the pigs' guidance, the animals destroyed all of Jones's oppressive tools, especially his whips. To mark their new freedom, the pigs renamed the farm as Animal Farm and painted the 7 commandments on the back of the barn, declaring that everything originated from humans was corrupt and that all animals were equal and free. After celebrating their victory, the animals began tending the farm, soon proving they could manage it better than Jones and his men ever did. While the other animals took on the physical labor, the pigs assumed roles as intellectual leaders. handling the farm's organization and management. They even created a flag for Animal Farm and dreamed of a future where all of England would be a free, animal-run state, completely liberated from human oppression. At this point, Snowball and Napoleon began clashing on numerous issues and disagreeing a lot. Since most animals are uneducated, almost all the farm's management and intellectual tasks fell to the pigs, who were the only ones able to read and write. Controversy soon emerged on the farm when it was discovered that the pigs were mixing the cow's milk with their own rations, something they had once condemned the humans for. The pigs defended this by claiming that, as the farm's thinkers, they needed the milk to stay sharp and effective. Squealer, another influential pig and a great speaker, took on the role of explaining these choices to the other animals. He justified why the newly ripened apples were also reserved exclusively for the pigs, arguing that without milk and apples, their mental capacities would suffer, and without their guidance, Mr. Jones would return. The animals, fearful of this possibility, accepted Squealer's explanation without question, as they did for anything the pigs told them. To spread the message of animalism, Snowball and Napoleon began sending pigeons to neighboring farms, hoping to inspire similar revolts. This sparked fear among local farmers, who worried that their own animals might rise up as those on Animal Farm had done. One day, as the animals anticipated, Mr. Jones returned with a band of men from nearby farms, determined to retake the land. This event became known as the Battle of the Cowshed. During the fight, a sheep was fatally shot by Jones, while Boxer, the farm's strongest workhorse, struck a man with his hooves, thinking he had killed him. Boxer later learned that the man was only knocked out and had managed to escape along with the other fleeing men, who were ultimately overpowered by the animal's resistance. Snowball himself was wounded by stray bullets, but he survived and was celebrated as the hero of the farm's defense, a brave leader who had secured their freedom. After this defeat, Jones would never again attempt to reclaim his lost farm. Molly, a young mare, had never truly believed in animalism and was indifferent to the revolution. Eventually, she left the farm altogether, returning to a life under human care, something she preferred much more than the new life the pigs had brought to the farm. Meanwhile, Snowball proposed a series of innovative ideas for the farm, while Napoleon, who offered no ideas of his own, constantly opposed him. One of Snowball's major projects was a windmill, intended to generate electricity and reduce the animals' workload. Another point of conflict between the two was their approach to the defense of the farm. Napoleon wanted to arm the animals with firearms to protect themselves, whereas Snowball argued for spreading revolutions to other farms so that they wouldn't have to defend Animal Farm alone. One evening, after a large meeting in the barn, Napoleon suddenly unleashed a pack of dogs on Snowball. Chased off the farm, Snowball narrowly escaped. He would never return to the Animal Farm. With Snowball gone, Napoleon seized complete control of the farm, backed by his 9 aggressive dogs. He ended open discussions and debates, silencing all dissent, and declared that decisions would now be made by a closed committee of pigs. A few weeks after Snowball's expulsion, Squealer announced that the Windmill project would proceed after all. When some animals expressed confusion, Squealer explained that the windmill was always Napoleon's idea, not Snowball's, portraying Snowball as a bad influence and a traitor to their cause. Accepting his word, the animals began working tirelessly to construct the windmill, but they lacked proper tools and materials to follow with such a project. Napoleon soon began trading with other farms to acquire the materials and tools needed to complete the windmill. The animals were uneasy, recalling that trade with humans had been strictly prohibited since the Revolution. However, Napoleon assured them that this was a false claim spread by Snowball, insisting that no such rule had ever been agreed upon. During this time, the pigs moved into the farmhouse and began sleeping in beds. Once again, the animals remembered that this had once been forbidden, but Squealer quickly dismissed their concerns, asserting that there had never been a prohibition. By now, the 7 commandments had subtly changed, twisted to accommodate whatever the pigs needed them to convey. One stormy night, the unfinished windmill was destroyed. Napoleon immediately blamed Snowball, claiming he was seeking revenge on Animal Farm. A bounty was placed on Snowball's capture, dead or alive. Faced with the loss of the windmill, the animals had to start construction from scratch, a daunting task made even harder by the arrival of winter. Exposed to the cold, snow, and worsening food shortages, the animals endured greater hardship than they had ever experienced, even under Jones's rule. Napoleon introduced a human named Whymper as the farm's lawyer and mediator for trade with the outside world. To maintain the illusion of prosperity, the animals filled the food bins with sand, covering them with a thin layer of grain for Whymper to see. They even trained the sheep to spread news of the farm's success, and Whymper, believing these fabrications, shared them widely. A new deal was struck with Whymper. He would receive 400 eggs each week to sell, but when the hens rebelled against the exploitative demand, Napoleon cut their rations and unleashed his dogs to crush the uprising. After forcing the chickens into submission, Napoleon launched an extensive investigation into all supposed damage Snowball had caused. Anything that went wrong on the farm was Snowball's fault. Squealer took the opportunity to paint Snowball as a long-standing traitor, claiming he was always a spy for Mr. Jones. He accused Snowball of collaborating with a nearby farmer, Frederick of Pinchfield Farm, with plans to attack Animal Farm again. Squealer even suggested that Snowball had tried to betray them during the Battle of the Cowshed. By now, the pigs had begun rewriting history itself to suit their agenda, molding the past to secure their control over the other animals. One night, Napoleon summoned all the animals to the barn and forced a selected few to confess to their supposed crimes. Many animals stepped forward, admitting to working for Snowball, spying for him, sabotaging the farm for him, and many other acts of betrayal against Napoleon. Without exception, Napoleon's vicious dogs executed them all on the spot. After witnessing the brutal execution of their friends, many animals, filled with sadness, gathered around the windmill and sang their anthem, Beasts of England. Squealer rushed them with several guard dogs, declaring that the anthem was no longer necessary. It had been the song of the Revolution, and now that all traitors were dead, the Revolution was complete. Singing Beasts of England was now forbidden. An animal who disobeyed would face the same fate as the so-called traitors. By now, the animals barely remembered life under Jones. They ate little, were constantly hungry, and worked tirelessly. Yet, the pigs claimed that food production had increased by 200 or even 300%. The pigs created new titles for Napoleon, and a new anthem was written for him as well, glorifying him as the great leader who had ensured the revolution's success through his hard work. At last, the windmill was completed, but rumors of a major attack by Frederick began to spread. Even as Animal Farm's relations with neighboring farms had recently improved. And as it so occurred, Napoleon sold a pile of timber to Frederick, who paid with fake money. Realizing he'd been tricked, Napoleon became enraged. Not long after, Frederick led a surprise attack to destroy the windmill and reclaim the farm. Though the animals thought they were prepared, the humans came armed with heavy firepower, proving to be formidable opponents. Napoleon attempted to call for reinforcements from the humans of Foxwood Farm, but they refused to assist. The attackers used gunpowder to blow up the windmill, demolishing it completely. Seeing this brutal act enraged the animals, who fought back fiercely, unafraid of dying. They managed to wound the men severely and drive them off their land, but many animals were killed, and even more were injured. This day became known as the Battle of the Windmill. Following the battle, Napoleon and the other pigs celebrated their victory with a stash of alcohol they found in Jones's old basement, while the other animals were left exhausted, hungry, and wounded. A new holiday was declared, and Napoleon was once again hailed as the hero of Animal Farm for defeating Frederick and his men. Soon after, the animals began the arduous task of rebuilding the windmill once more. Despite eating less and enduring frequent food shortages, the pigs assured the animals that production was higher than ever. By this point, most animals had forgotten what life under Jones was even like. The pigs insisted they were now living under vastly improved conditions than they had ever before. As time passed, the pigs solidified their position as authorities and no longer considered themselves to be equals to other animals. While the pigs grew fatter, the other animals endured constant hunger. Eventually, Animal Farm was declared a republic, and only Napoleon ran as candidate for presidency, winning the election unopposed. Moses the Raven returned to the farm, once again preaching about Sugar Candy Mountain. Although the pigs ordered the other animals to ignore him, they did not banish Moses. Instead, they allowed him to stay comfortably at the farmhouse. Boxer, the farm's strongest workhorse, had been injured in the battle against Frederick and had only grown weaker and sicker since then. Nevertheless, he continued to work tirelessly until one day he collapsed from exhaustion and could no longer get up. The pigs claimed they had arranged for a human veterinarian to take Boxer to a hospital, but in reality, they had sold him to a horse slaughterer. Boxer was destined to be butchered and sold for parts. The pigs used the money from his sale to buy whiskey. Meanwhile, Squealer lied to the other animals, saying that Boxer had died under a veterinarian's care. In his supposed final words, Squealer claimed Boxer had urged his fellow animals to defend the Revolution and praised Comrade Napoleon as their hero. A long time passed. Many animals who had witnessed the Revolution died, as did Jones himself. The windmill was finally completed, but much had changed around the farm. It became evident that no animal, no matter how hard they worked or how old they were, would ever be allowed to retire. Although the farm had grown richer, only the pigs and dogs benefited from the prosperity. The other animals remained impoverished, living lives filled with hunger, misery, and exhausting labor. They no longer remembered the past, and even the revolution itself was little more than a faint memory. One day, the pigs began walking upright. The sheep silenced any objections from the other animals, and soon the pigs adopted human behaviors, performing human tasks and even wearing clothes. The commandments were gone, and the pigs now held a position of absolute superiority over the other animals. Eventually, humans from neighboring farms visited Animal Farm, observing and inspecting every aspect of it. None of the animals dared speak out or criticize the pigs, as they were far too afraid of the dogs, the pigs, and now even the humans. A grand dinner was held between the humans and the pigs, followed by a card game. The humans praised the pigs, admiring the efficient labor system they had established at Animal Farm. Napoleon warmly accepted the compliments and announced that the farm would once again be known as Manor Farm. As they toasted to this change and resumed their card game, a fight erupted. A pig and a human were both caught cheating, leading to a heated confrontation. Some animals watched the chaos through a window, and in that moment, they realized there was no difference between the pigs and the humans, for one was indistinguishable from the other. While that's quite a journey, there are a few things I'd like to discuss in this final chapter, so let's start with something simple. In the Portuguese edition of Animal Farm, Manor Farm was translated as Solar Farm. An interesting choice, I will say, but it doesn't really change the book that much. Now, as for the book's themes, Animal Farm is an obvious satire of the Russian Revolution, and here's my interpretation of what each of the characters and animals represent. Old Major represents Lenin, while Napoleon represents Stalin, and Snowball represents Trotsky. The pigs as a whole symbolize politicians, the state elite, and wealthier Soviets. Mr. Jones represents Tsar Nicholas II, and his men are the Tsarists, though without the historical detail of the family's execution. Moses the Raven symbolizes the Orthodox Church. Frederick represents Hitler, with his farm Pinchfield symbolizing Nazi Germany. Pilkington and his Foxwood farm stand for the USA. Molly represents the wealthy class of Russian society who fled after the revolution. The dogs represent the KGB, Russia's secret police. The horses are the true laborers, those who give everything for the success of their motherland. The chickens represent specialized workers, like doctors and engineers. The sheep are the masses who believe everything the politicians tell them. The rats symbolize criminals who work only for their own benefit, living underground. As for the cows, I'd say they represent people who just do enough to get by, not doing much else in life. Benjamin the donkey likely represents the older generation, the few who remember what things were like before the revolution and witness what it ultimately led to. Finally, the cats represent, let's say, those willing to companion anyone else who would pay. My take is that female cat described in the book can be quite the seductive type, so that's my take on it. These are my interpretations of the characters' symbolic roles, but there's a lot of debate about Orwell's real meaning with each one of them. If you have a different take, please share it in the comments. But that's the end of the video, so if you enjoyed this, consider subscribing. Until the next one.